All right, it is my pleasure to introduce our speaker for today, June Girard. And she's going to speak to us on the Nobel Prize in Economics. So welcome, and I'll share your program as soon as you're ready.
Okay, now I am computer illiterate, but I'm going to try to operate this thing. Oh, you did it.
Well, I just shared it, and then you're
Okay.
going to do all the other good stuff.
Okay, so I can just push this down arrow.
Let me get rid of this little thing here.
Okay.
Okay. Yep.
Okay, thank you. What you're looking at is the trophy that every Nobel Prize winner receives. It's solid gold, and it's, of course, a picture of Alfred Nobel. I'd like to say I have absolutely no credits in the field of economics, and I couldn't believe it when I was assigned this topic. I actually tried to refuse it, and then was told, well, go ahead and read what she got it for, and then tell me. Well, what Claudia Golden received the reward for is Women in the Workplace, which includes the history of women and their rights, and that's right up my alley. So I found that I was going to really enjoy this. I'd learn along with you about her report. So we'll start with, and I'm going to hit this thing. This is Claudia Golden. She is the recipient of this very special prize in economic sciences. And the Nobel Prize was awarded to her for a comprehensive account of 200 years of women's participation and earnings in the workplace. She discusses family, home, the marketplace, employment, and the lack of equal pay. Her research has advanced the understanding of the gender gap in the labor market. She had 200 years of women's participation, and she wrote that her research does not offer solutions, but has proven to policymakers that they should be able to tackle the problem. And so she has scientifically provided a roadmap to pave a better route for women going forward. The concept of human capital has become the dominant analytical tool of labor economists. And she has studied the resources of women that are allocated for product distribution and consumption. Now, all those words simply means that women, when they go to work, are in the economic standard of the country, and they are providing a resource by their work and their product, and then whatever it is consumed by most of us. So what should be the function of women in the workplace? Today, most government agencies and large banks have a staff of economists to analyze not only the prices of goods and services, but the prices of the resource. That is to use to produce something and have buyers and sellers brought together. There are 5 categories of the Nobel Prize Awards. In 1876, Alfred Nobel created this prize. The current year's nominees, and there's a list of maybe 15 people for each category. Those nominees are not published, and the complete list of any of the year's prizes is not disclosed in any category for 50 years. This, of course, is Adam Smith. He is the father of economics. And you ask, oh, what is economics? Well, one answer that was given in 1776 when he published an inquiry into the nature and causes of the wealth of nations, he says that economics includes production, distribution, consumption, demand, and supply. Oh, I did something. I'm trying. I went too, okay. I think so, yes. Today, economics is scheduled as is defined as a social science concerned with our gross domestic product and our customer price index. In 1849, the phrase the dismal science was used to describe economics as the study of scarcity, conflict, and trade-off. So we went to in the gender gap. And what is that? Well, it plays an important part in our economy and has for a very long time. So it's an unfair difference between men and women in terms of opportunity, compensation, and status in the workplace. Gender discrimination is rare in entry-level jobs, but starts later in careers. Women are likely to have lower earnings because they provide care for children or seniors that affects their work patterns. And for instance, in 2019, the labor force participation rate of mothers with children under the age of 18 was only 72%. Single women participated at a rate of 77%. A Bank of America research paper revealed that men working full-time, year-round, had a median retirement income of $100,000, as opposed to the same category of women who only had $30,000 for their retirement income. From the gender pay gap to the lack of women in executive leadership roles, the story of gender wage gaps is linked to the history of labor in the American legal and cultural limitations on women's ability. Our nation's story leads to consequences in our national economy, and compounding that problem is on average that women live 5 years longer than men. In 1776, the American woman was ignorant of man's world, neither interested. I'm not doing very well with this thing, but anyway, we talked about this. So I'm going to go to the next one. Here we are, the 1776 American woman who was neither interested in a man's world or able to understand it. And it was believed that she needed the guardianship of her father, and she was a servant to her husband. Since the early 19th century, professionals have been invoking scientific expertise to prescribe what women should do. And for the most part, they were deemed to work outside the home as laundresses, midwives, nurses, governess, or domestic services in the homes of others. Among the diagnoses and remedies that were believed at that time was that menstruation was an illness, pregnancy a disabling condition, and higher education a threat to the health of the uterus. Women began working as seamstresses, stenographers, teachers, musicians, artists, authors, and journalists in the late 1870s. And industrial development accelerated by the manufacturing requirements of the Civil War, which demanded factory workers. Thousands of women entered the labor market with no marketable skills. So women glutted the sewing trade, and they soon began to agitate for equal pay. The struggle for equality before the law was amplified by three phases of activity. In 1848, the Women's Rights Convention was held at Seneca Falls to establish women's right to vote. And then phase one occurred from 1848 to 1870. And this era was the fight to establish a right to own and control property and your own earnings, and the right to education and vote. Phase two covers the years 1870 to 1920, when women achieved the vote and the right to participate in public affairs, which led to gender equality being the #1 prediction of peace, because men and women perceive conflict differently. This poster is in the museum in Missouri, I think it is. People put it in their window to announce, sort of like we had the Gold Star mothers during World War II. This announced that this woman has registered to vote. In 1885, the American Economic Association was founded, and that association had members competing with essays. An outspoken social reformer named Mary Claire de Gaffenried wrote an essay in 1891 titled "The Georgia Cracker in the Cotton Mill," and that examined the paths for women to participate in the American economics profession. In 1893, she wrote an essay titled "The Condition of Wage-Earning Women," which won first prize in the Economic Association. It is of note that in 2013, Claudia Golden, our Nobel winner, was the president of the American Economic Association. In a 1908 landmark decision, the Supreme Court upheld a limitation of working hours for women workers by declaring that sex was a valid basis for classification. This decision was shown to be effective in denying women management jobs under the beneficial sounding and deceptive banner of protection of the weaker sex. Married women in particular suffered civil death, having no right to property, no legal entity or existence apart from their husbands. I wrote a paper in college on the legal rights of women in the workplace, quoting the Supreme Court in a line of decisions from 1884 to 1963. These decisions upheld the Equal Protection Clause and guaranteed the right to follow any of the common legitimate occupations of life. The quote from the Supreme Court was that it requires no argument to show the right to work. I think you can all read it. However, limitations solidified into union contracts that shut women out of promotions, overtime pay, and seniority rights. And because of these exceptions, no protection was offered to non-union women. The whole structure of restrictive labor laws stood until 1964, and the Civil Rights Act was perhaps second only to women's suffrage in securing equal rights for women. To this day, women do not have a constitutional guarantee of equal status before the law. We continue to fight for the Equal Rights Amendment, which is on the board here and simply states that equality of rights should not be abridged by any state or the United States on account of sex. The equality of women is only protected by legislation instead of a constitutional amendment, which can be changed, of course, as we have seen our legislation changed recently. The increasing number of married women entering the labor force and the wide disparities and fluctuations observed in the rate that sales participate in labor force drew attention to the fact that women's decision to supply labor was strongly related to the size, age, and assets of her household. In other words, for the money. In her analysis, Golden reported that a woman's role in the job market and the pay she receives are not influenced just by social and economic change. They are determined partly by her individual decisions, like how much education to get. Women often take jobs that allow them to be on call at home or work that often pays less. This process of evaluating prospects helps explain why change in the labor market gender gaps have been so slow. In her research, Golden confirmed that women's role in the job market has not moved in a straight line, but has waxed and waned with women's own ideas of social norms and their prospects in the workplace. Golden explains why the gender gap started to close in the 1980s. Having joined the League of Women Voters in 1957, I was and still am a cheerleader for equal rights for women, which by necessity brings women into the marketplace. In 1983, I participated in a program to help women enter the marketplace. This is the front copy of the program. As you can see, it's a re-entry program. And then I'm listed in the bottom teaching or discussing healthcare. And you can read all of the different areas that were covered that day to help women back into the workplace. And these reentry programs, I think during the early 1980s, were very popular in many places. Let's see. Women dominate in three, I think it's 3 or 4, let me get it. In 4 industries. That's basically, it's more female than male workers are in law, in higher education, in faith-based nonprofits, and in healthcare. Women make up 53, oh, here we go. Women make up 53% in higher education, 63.8 in, I've got it backwards. You can see it. Okay. The faith-based is 77.6 and healthcare is the same. That's in the environment. Other aspects of gender bias found the most challenging environment in the practice of law. By contrast, women in higher education had the least challenging environment, and even though they were faced with constrained communication, unequal standards, salary inequality, and harassment, they experienced more egalitarian organizational norms. They were more willing to pursue promotions, had more sponsorship, and received more recognition for their contributions. And the small number of female leaders in the faith-based nonprofits reported the lowest level of harassment and salary inequality, and reports of that salary inequality could be due to that industry's low salary to start with. Over the years, women, and especially women of color, have remained underrepresented across the corporate pipeline. Before 1972, there were no female Fortune 500 chief executives. Katharine Graham at the Washington Post was the first female CEO of a large corporation, and she was taking her husband's place. Then, from 1972 to 2017, we had 32 female CEOs. And for the first time in Fortune 500's 68-year history, we now have more than 10% of our corporations led by women. And in January of 2023, we had 53 female CEOs out of the 196,000 CEOs in the United States. Women make up 2/3 of the minimum wage workforce and are still not represented in high pay fields. The average CEO of a Fortune 500 company earned $16.7 million in 2022. The AFL-CIO reported that that was 272 times the average daily salary, or the average salary, for someone employed by that same company. There are myths about women at work, and the first one is that they are less ambitious. Women are defying the outdated notion that work and life are incompatible and that one does at the expense of the other. The biggest barrier is the glass ceiling. And actually, the broken rung is the greatest obstacle on the ladder to the glass ceiling. For every 100 men promoted from entry level to manager, 87 white women and 72 women of color were promoted. Microaggressions. That includes comments and actions that demean or dismiss someone based on gender, race, of other aspects of their identity, causing extreme stress. And I just happened to pick up today's Gainesville Sun, and there's an article in there with a picture of Barbara Walters, and it says that even after she spent more than a decade working her way up the ranks, she was called Barbie and Baby, and she once said, "I would pick up the paper every day and read about what a flop I was." That's microaggression. So, and here we go to 4. Myth 4 is that women are the only ones that want flexible work, or they're mostly. And that's not true. Reality is that men and women see flexibility as a top 3 employee benefit and critical to their company's success. For women, the hybrid or remote work is about a lot more flexibility. But second only to healthcare, workplace flexibility ranks above benefits such as parental leave and childcare. 60% of companies have increased their financial and staffing investments in diversity, equity, and inclusion over the past year. And nearly 3 in 4 human resource leaders say that DEI is critical to their company's future. DEI seeks to promote the fair treatment and full participation of all people, particularly groups like women, who have been underrepresented or subject to discrimination. I think most of us here are aware that our governor saw to it that they disbanded the entire DEI committees and people who worked at UF. But most profitable companies are less biased, in line with the economic theory of the Nobel Prize winner Gary Becker, who said that discrimination is bad for business. So today, women in the workplace are tapping into unexpected and countless industries and tactics to land a job. In 2023, Stephanie Cohen, a 25-year executive with Goldman Sachs, shocked the business world when she joined an exodus of female talent to be the CEO of Cloudflare, a company whose goal is to build a better internet. Today, we have celebrated the study of economic science and Gloria Golden. Thank you.
All right.
Okay.
So you have time for some questions?
So much for my computer skills, or when
That's okay. We're a team.
okay.
All right. So any questions here in the room? Okay.
June, when the Civil Rights Act was passed in 1964, it's my understanding that women or sex was added as just anecdotally and by mere happenstance. Did you run across anything to substantiate that or not in your research?
I have a thing. No, it's not. We're still trying to get it. It was voted in every state to put.
Okay, and I'm talking about the Civil Rights Act of 1964.
Oh, the Civil Rights Act.
I'm sorry,
had-
yeah, not the Equal Rights Amendment. When the Civil Rights Act was passed, did you run across anything that indicated that women or sex, the word sex was added as a mere afterthought?
No, I did not.
Okay, okay. The rumor I heard was that one of the female senators said, we should put sex in there too, and they sort of said, oh, okay.
And they did
And it
it.
changed the world.
You
Yeah.
bet. You bet.
Any other questions? Anyone on Zoom?
At the beginning, you talked about Goldwyn indicating that the paper that she did laid out the groundwork or
Yes.
showed a path
Pathway.
forward.
Right.
Can you talk about that a little more in terms of what the techniques are for addressing the glass ceiling issue and other limitations in
But
terms of
she-
the path forward?
Yeah, well, basically, she addressed all these. The first question I asked when I read about her was, well, what did she do? I mean, she didn't solve anything, and we all have known, those of us who have been aware of it at all, have known for years and years and years all of the inequities that women have faced. So, but basically, I would say the way they feel that she has defined it scientifically so that people can approach it as I said, look at just generation gap and plan to do something there. The pathway is to go to gender gap, to go to the wealth gap, to talk about the retirement benefits of Social Security and how that affects our national economy. And so those are the pathways that she's saying we need to address and equalize.
When I was in college at the University of Chicago, I worked for Margaret Reed, who was professor emeritus of economics there. And in her case, she came from a farm family of 9 kids in Saskatchewan, Canada. Made it all the way to professor emeritus at the University of Chicago. And basically, Milton Friedman used a lot of her work in winning the Nobel Prize for himself.
I wouldn't be surprised. But there is so much really well studied background to the problems that women have had in the workplace from day one, that it was hard to believe that somebody could solve it, which she didn't. But she did tell us if we address some of these various issues, we might be able to do a better job.
Other questions, comments?
Here's a ray of hope at Whitney Laboratory, which is a satellite campus for University of Florida. They're currently in a search for a new director. There are 4 finalists. They're all women.
Oh, wonderful. That interesting. And that is the one field where that they have less opposition in education.
Any other comments? I understand Ken Burns saw you in the hallway and said, "You're a woman, you can speak about this."
And in what?
When Ken Burns assigned you this, he
Oh,
said, "You're a
yes,
woman, you could do this."
Well, yes, I opened my apartment door and Ken Burns and his wife Laura were walking by in the hallway. And Ken said, "Oh, June, you can do the Nobel Prize on Economics." And I said, "Oh, sure." And I laughed and closed my door. So, and about a month later, I received an email from Rod asking me what date I would like for my presentation. Well, I called him right away and I said, "I can't do that. I would be a fraud. I know nothing about economics." And, I took my course in college like everybody has to, but that was about it. He said, "Well, look it up. I think you'll be surprised. And then if you still feel you can't do it, we'll talk about it." So I looked it up and found out, of course, that it was all about women and I've been in that field for years and years and years.
I am a witness to that because I was walking in the hall with Ken. And about 30 seconds after he told me I was doing the prize in physics, you opened the door and he snagged you.
Oh, so you do the same thing. He was very good at that. I think ILR is going to miss him.
Yeah. A cast of successful presenters, so we appreciate everything.
Yes.
Thank you, June, for being with us, and come back
Thank
next
you.
week for another presentation.
For putting up with my inability to work this computer, but